are live on Facebook, and this is another CE National Digital Lab. Thank you so much for joining us. If you're watching live on Facebook, or maybe you are watching on demand and you have found this video on our CE National Facebook page or our YouTube channel, we are so glad that you are watching. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for your continued support. If you're not a newcomer and you've been searching out our digital labs, we so appreciate your feedback. If you ever have a topic, if you're a pastor or a ministry leader and you ever have a topic that you would love for us at CE National to cover, reach out to me. My name's Eric Miller with CE National. I'm the Director of Ministry Operations. We would love to help provide topics that benefit you and your ministry and your team. CE National exists to partner with local churches. We want to provide ministry equipping experiences, and so we want to do that through these digital labs. And so this is an opportunity for you to engage. And today's topic is, how do you connect your children's ministry with your youth ministry? And so oftentimes in our churches, especially if you're a new church, or maybe you've been in operation for a long time and you just are kind of running on all cylinders and you've been doing things for a long time, or maybe you're trying to take a hard look at, how do we integrate our children's ministry with our youth ministry? This is the conversation for you. So we have with us today three of my good friends, my former teammates in Frederick, Maryland. We have Erin O'Hara is the children's director there in Frederick, Maryland at Grace Community Church. Angie Dallavalle is the middle school director, and Fletcher Abbott is the high school director. Some of you know I was the youth pastor there and then discipleship pastor at Grace in Frederick for the last 17 years. And so now I'm working with CE National, and it's a joy to get to serve alongside of these guys and to interview them today and have them share with us some of the things that they've been implementing even in the last couple of years as the team has grown and as God has done some amazing things. So really our goal for this conversation, for this discussion today, is to help be a resource for you as a ministry leader, as a children's director, a youth pastor, maybe you're a lead pastor, and you're watching this video. We want to encourage you to come up with a plan to better connect and integrate your children and your youth ministries. We all know how difficult those preteen years can be, even the early teenage years. And so we want to help you learn how you can hand off your students from your children's ministry into your youth ministry in a way that's meaningful, in a way that helps connect the dots for our students, and in a way that helps them take those next steps in their faith. And so today we're going to be talking with these guys about doing that, as that's something that we were working on when I was there. They've continued to progress in all of that. So guys, why don't you introduce yourselves, just briefly tell us what is that current role, kind of what that means for children's ministry. I know that can have different definitions for different churches, middle school and high school as well. And then even how long you've been in that role. Why don't you start, Erin?
I'm so happy to be here today. I've been on staff at Grace since 2003, but I have been in my role as children's director, I think, since 2012, maybe 2011. I was trying to go back and see, but about 9 years in this role as children's director. I oversee our babies through our 5th grade, and we serve. Our goal is to cultivate a safe climate where kids can connect with Christ, and that's overseeing our families, our volunteers, and our kids in those age ranges. How much more do you want me to share?
No, that's great. That's great. Yeah. Angie, what about you?
Hand it off to me. Yeah, because I'm the middle school director. So I have been in my role I'm starting my 4th year. So I've had a whole generation of 6th through 8th graders come through my ministry, and I have a new class coming up. But I'm that bridge role. So I get to take the kids that are coming from our Kids Min and bring them into our youth ministry program. And then I get to see them into high school as they're taking more ownership of their faith. So I kind of get to hold their hand as they learn to make their faith their own, which is really an exciting place to be. I like that a lot.
Yeah. Fletcher?
Yeah, and I'm Fletcher. I have been here for a little over 2 years. I'm the new kid on the block compared to these others here. But I handle the high school side of the ministry, so I kind of basically pick up where Angie does, and she does an excellent job handing them off into the high school side here, and further get them equipped and ready on what it means to take full ownership of their faith, to where they are saying, this is what I believe, not just simply what I've grown up in, what my parents believe, but this is what I'm taking with me as I go on out of these doors. And the idea being that they go off and make disciples for themselves as they continue on.
Yeah. So give our viewers who are watching this, kind of give them the context of the scope of your ministry. When do you meet? How often do you meet? Kind of what's your aim within each of your ministries, and then kind of give us how you're connected, so that then we can later kind of set up the conversation from there.
Okay, so our children's ministry pre-COVID probably served close to 100 children and students through our ministry, with the Sunday morning ministry, 2 services, children, nursery, preschool, elementary, smaller classes through elementary. We have a Wednesday night growth club ministry that meets twice during the year on Wednesday evenings for shorter chunks of time, like 6 to 8 weeks at a time, focused on specific topics or growth areas in the scripture in very small discipleship groups. And then we have a summer growth club, much like VBS, but over the last 4 years, we've actually done it on Sundays and incorporate that on a Sunday morning and engaging our families to continue consistency through this summer. We also oversee a Kids Lead program ministry for our 4th and 5th graders over the last year and a half. We've done that. And yeah.
Great. Yeah. Angie?
Yeah, so do you want pre or post COVID? So
Pre-COVID is good. Yeah, during COVID is a whole nother.
So we serve about 40 to 50 middle school students throughout the year. We have pre-COVID, we have a Wednesday night program where we meet that's very discipleship focused, and then Sunday morning a Bible study. I also run a middle school leadership team that the students get to apply for and get to be a part of, which has been really exciting because that's a new thing that I got to implement. I can't remember what other details that you were asking for, but
you're good.
We'll probably fill in the gaps because our middle school and our high school ministry run in tandem still. So while we meet separately, our middle schoolers have their own groups and their own identity in the ministry. We're still one unified youth ministry program. And so on Wednesday nights, we're meeting at the same time in the same building. And there are some touch points where those groups engage with one another.
Yeah.
Like Angie said, high school runs in tandem with middle school. We're even having the same branding, which is very intentional on that. But we do kind of operate separately during that time to make sure we're fitting the needs of where our students are at. So even our adult volunteers, we call our youth staff, we have ones that are specifically designated for high school and ones specifically designated for middle school. So they have an investment within specific students throughout the entire year. And high school also has a student leadership team, of which the majority of the team this year actually, I know Eric, you were asked about connection points, so here's one. The majority of my high school leadership team this year were actually all middle school leaders under Angie last year. So that's kind of fun to see that connection happen there.
That's awesome. Now, one of the things I just heard you all mention was, like, Erin, you said you have a Kids Lead program. Angie, I know you have a middle school program. Fletcher, I know you have a high school leadership program. Kind of, how did that develop? How are those connected? Are they connected? Kind of share a little bit more about that.
Okay, so 2 summers ago, we just noticed the need and the desire for our kids to we saw leaders in our children and wanted to promote that. Angie, I think, had already developed and started the middle school student leadership team. And within children's ministry, as our kids are growing into that 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade range, and they're still integrated into children's ministry, giving them opportunities where they can pour back in, lead things, serve in ways in the church, really helps engage their faith and put into practice some of the things that they're learning. And so we started it with our VBS and doing giving opportunities for our kids to be part of our on-stage leadership team with worship and doing things like that. And then also we developed other roles like photography and small group leader assistance and cleanup and setup and different ways that our kids can engage just for that short time of Summer Growth Club / VBS. And out of that, we saw such a great desire. My co-director, Laurie Haynes, who is no longer with us, that's a passion of hers as well. So it was really neat to partner with her in developing an actual leadership curriculum, an application for the year where we plugged our kids actually into serving in roles within the church, greeting, security, checking kids in. And along with that mindset that as our kids are engaging in big church with adults, they're developing relationships in the church that will allow them to continue to walk in a church community as they grow older. The importance of being part of the body as a whole and not just in children's ministry. And that is a passion that we want to have, and we want to see our kids engaged far beyond when they grow out of our ministry.
Yeah, that's awesome. So Angie, kind of fill us in then, how is that handoff in the kids lead into your middle school leadership team?
Yeah, so the kids lead program is the newest leadership program. And then the middle school leadership program came right before that. But it's been really neat to see now we have these kids that are being developed as leaders and taking ownership of their faith and take that to middle school. And we go a little bit deeper. We look at helping them identify what their spiritual gifts are, and then not just giving them certain roles, but finding the right roles, finding their ways for them to serve and engage with a church body that align with their gifts, and trying out. It's a lot of like trial and error, like, well, why don't you try this and see how that goes. We do a lot of, they get to engage in the planning, so they get a little bit more ownership. And so they plan events throughout the year. They get to have a voice in just little things throughout our ministry year and big things. But Lighthouse, our vision is that we're adult-supported, student-led ministry. And so in middle school, I'm starting to build up those leaders so that they're ready to really take the reins in high school. And I'm giving them opportunities to do that. And what I love about having the kids lead program is that they're already familiar with serving, but then they just get to do that more. And because we have all of us, the 3 of us are in unity in that vision, my middle schoolers are often serving in children's ministry on Sundays, but not just like filled into a role. They're paired with an adult leader that they know or they have worked with, so that there's some discipleship happening while they're serving. And there's this ongoing relationship, and they're coming to know their place in the church body as a whole. They're not just the middle schoolers. They're part of Grace Community Church in a very tangible way.
I love that. And Fletcher, you and I know as you were coming on staff, we worked hard to continue the student-led model and that mindset. And so that was something that you were inheriting. We actually did other digital labs on that exact topic. If you're curious, if you're watching this and like, how do they do a student-led ministry? Go watch those. There's other videos. There's other digital labs on that. But Fletcher, kind of talk about then, how do you pick up those middle school students? And now as you're inheriting even this kind of other 3rd generation of kids lead, that's got to be super cool. Share with us just briefly about what does that look like for you?
Yeah, I want to make sure I'm not just repeating everything Angie said, because Angie said a lot of the good stuff there. But I would say one of the things that's kind of been a unique additional into that is now helping these student leaders grow in their self-awareness as a student leader, on what that means of as a leader, not just because I have this title, but because of who I am, my personality, I have influence over others because I have relationship with others in this youth group. So helping them understand, do you recognize how it was so different from this week to last week when you set the tone in the discussion in that group, whereas the other week you helped to kind of get it off the rails or whatever it might be, but helping them grow in that self-awareness to where then it turns into more of them pouring back into others, funneling back into these other groups that Erin and Angie just talked about, how it becomes this kind of cycle of these ones I'm inheriting had people that poured into them. Now it's giving them the opportunity to help to pour back into some of these other younger groups.
That's awesome. As I listen to you guys share, and I've had the privilege and opportunity to see this be implemented, so I know what it looks like, and it really is an amazing culture that has been created within the church there, and yet it wasn't always that way. So let's kind of rewind now and go backwards from here. Talk about what did things look like before, prior to all of this, pre-COVID, even pre you guys being in your roles. How were maybe your ministries siloed in a way? What were maybe some of the disconnects there, or talk about a little bit about that?
Well, I've been on staff the longest, and I've worked with you, Eric, many years ago, coming into children's ministry when you were youth pastor at that point. And I would just say, recognizing, I believe that you said it earlier, that we often in ministry are kind of just meeting the immediate needs. We are surviving. We're going to the next Sunday or this coming month and trying to do what we recruit and lead and do things. And I felt like, we were there for a long time. And we still are. The intentionality to have to take a step back and strategize and plan and say, what do we really want? We don't always take the time to do that, the necessary time to do that. And so I would say that is part of the siloing, is just the survival within each ministry. I can only focus on my birth to fifth graders, or, even in bringing staff on, training them and trying to focus on those areas and getting those better. So, while you were focused on youth, I was focused on children, and we had a friendship and a relationship, that allowed us to like go back and forth about certain things, but not a lot of time to really go deeper. And I believe we were starting to do that with conversations that we were having, meeting more regularly about what it looked like to hand off children into the youth ministry. But even our offices, and maybe other churches can relate, our offices were siloed, our hours were different. We weren't always, able to be around one another in order to interact that way. And so that made it difficult. Now, one of the things I've seen us come out of is our offices. We have changed over the last couple of years. Our offices are now all together. Now, stupid COVID has caused our hours and our time in the office not to be quite as much from working from home and working, but we're trying to be intentional about Zooming together, staff meetings, and even just the three of us meeting together. But one of the other interesting things I think coming out is that I have grown the time to my children are now not just in children's ministry, they are in youth ministry. You were single guy in youth ministry, but now we have, two directors who have kids not only in children's ministry, but in youth ministry. So the concept of the three of us having kids in each other's ministry has created a different culture for us to go, what do parents really need? What do I need as a parent while my kids are now in this ministry? And being able to ask those questions of one another and process through things differently has really brought us, I think, a lot closer together.
Yeah.
I think there was also, sorry, there was also a strategic change in the staffing when I came on board, because Eric was in position as a youth pastor, and he was running a program with a high school leadership team. And so while he was serving all of the age groups to the best of his ability, he had a lot of time and energy that went into equipping those high school leaders. And then Erin was serving as the solo children's director. We were able to bring on a co-director later that helped them be able to split the focus. But preschool and nursery take up a lot of time and energy to recruit and to staff safely. And so I feel like there was a major gap in leadership over those transitional years. And so when the church chose to hire me as middle school director, they gave the folks somebody to focus their energy on that transition from, late elementary school through middle school, which is such an important season of life, especially in your spiritual development, and then into high school. And that made a huge difference.
Absolutely. And I will say, just piggyback on that, having Angie served in my children's ministry for several years, and actually served with our 5th grade class on Wednesday nights. And that's that same class that now is Fletcher's high school student leadership team. You can see clearly what it means to have an intentional leader who was in children's ministry, moving into middle school and having that. I mean, it's powerful.
Yeah, I was going to say earlier, I do think it's a unique dynamic, and I don't want this to be lost on our viewers, because while, Erin, you're correct, your children are in high school and middle school ministry. Fletcher and Angie, your children are in children's and middle school ministry, and there is that overlap, but there was some incredible intentionality years ago. I remember, Erin, you and I sitting down, it was one summer, and you were like, we've got to figure this out. How do we hand off children into youth ministry better? And then even when Lori came on as the co-director within the children's ministry, by the way, viewers, she didn't die. She not
Thank
with
you. I wanted to say that.
another job, yes. But there was amazing intentionality with all of that, even to the point where I remember at some staff meetings we talked about it beyond just us of, hey, team, you all need to know, here are ways that we're working to be intentional and we're wanting to better hand this off. And it took pressing pause on the week to week and saying, we have to prioritize this and make it important. So Fletcher, I would love, even just if you would kind of start us with this next question, in the role like that you're in, being on the receiving end of now children and middle school, like, where do you see the benefits of this? Why do you see this as such an important need for connecting children in youth ministries? And Erin and Angie, you're welcome to speak into that, but
You're asking a loaded question, right? I mean, where to start on the answering that, but I will try very hard to be quality but brief on this here. What I see benefit is it is one thing to say I have at best 4 years with this student to invest in them from beginning to end. It's another thing to say I get to pick up where this student has had 14 years of being invested into and get to carry that on for the next 4 years. And I wish I really could honestly put words to that, but it is a little bit difficult to. But it's almost a little bit more like you get to start hitting the ground running right off the bat, rather than going into square one. And I don't just even mean that in terms of these students have this great foundation, which they do. They absolutely do. But they also have a more realistic expectation of what they're getting themselves into as well. Whereas before, if a student would have gone into like student leadership at first, or even just the high school ministry in general, there was a lot of maybe kind of uncertainty of what's expected of me, what can I expect from others in this. Whereas now they're kind of coming into it with this level of anticipation of, I'm ready to get started for what's next. I don't know if that truly answers your question, but
I think it does. And I think it's so important. I just wanted to highlight kind of what you were saying, like for the average youth pastor, right, who's maybe overseeing high school, or maybe they have middle school and high school, it's tough to know how do you identify where students at spiritually and figure out next steps for them. In most youth ministries, your students are all over the place. You're going to have, students that are bringing their friends, and they don't have a clue between the Old Testament and the New Testament. You say, turn to the book of John, and they have no idea where that is, right? They've never heard some of the Old Testament stories. They have no clue what the gospel is. They don't have a personal relationship with Jesus. And yet, for you in this model to know that the majority, you're still going to have that. You hope that you have new students come in, right? But for you, what you're saying is that you have the base, the core of your youth ministry coming into 9th grade, they've had all those things. They understand the gospel. They know the difference between New Testament and Old Testament. They know where the books of the Bible are. They know that basic foundation. That's a game changer. That's huge. So,
well, and also there's an investment prior to even getting them. So like Erin and I and Fletcher and I and the three of us, we talk regularly about what this looks like, what these transitions look like, what our ministries are doing, how we can support each other. We're each other's cheerleaders, and we pray for these students and for these families. We're looking at investing in the family as a whole and each student as individuals. And we're doing that together to the best of our ability. We're not doing it perfectly, but I think that makes an incredible difference to have you already are connected in a very real way to these kids that are coming in and going out.
Mm-hmm.
So Erin, from your perspective then as children's director, I would just love to hear your thoughts on that too, of why do you see a need for better connecting and handing off students from one ministry to the next? What would your...
I think those transitions, it's so easy for kids to fall through the cracks. And I love being intentional with Angie, and Eric, you and I were as well, in making sure our 5th graders felt welcome into youth group. And it was something, like you said, we talked a lot about our summer VBSs. We did something specific just for the 5th graders back then to get them used to serving and being together and meeting the youth leaders and meeting the kids. And that has continued each summer. We're very intentional about that. Because, again, like I said before, in 4th and 5th grade, as our kids are like, I don't want to be in kids ministry anymore, it's too babyish or whatever, giving them that excitement about the next stage, I think is really important. The other thing I think that's really important is having our youth and children connected in ways that our youth then can come back and pour into the lives of our kids. And our kids get to see that, man, there's a teenage boy that, likes to lead worship. And there's a teenage girl that wants to be an assistant in my class and teach me that she has a faith relationship and she prays out loud, and what they're struggling through just a few years older than them. Wow, what an impact that is. And so for me, knowing the kids that have moved out of the ministry, I can still have touch points with them through middle school and high school and draw them back in, whether that's pairing them with me or pairing them with other leaders or teachers in the classrooms. It's just like an organic way to stay connected, as a body.
Yeah, I love that part of the culture that you guys have really prioritized within the church, within youth ministry, student ministry, children's ministry, is that, Angie, you said it earlier, that our children and youth are part of the church. They're not the future of the church. They're part of the church. And so you're hearing it today to our viewers. You're hearing it, how they've worked hard to integrate ways for them to serve and to lead in unique ways that I think it sends that message to not only those children and the youth, but to their parents and to the families as well, where you're really saying, like, no, you're a part of the church, you're a part of the body of Christ, and there's a place for you. It's not the, hey, you're little Eric and you're only in middle school right now, and someday you'll get to do something, but it's not going to be until you graduate from college or whatever. And So that, I love that.
And I think like that culture extends even beyond our leadership programs, because we're constantly looking at the students in our ministry. And if there's some place that we can get them plugged in, even if they haven't stepped up as student leaders, we're looking at, oh, this kid loves to make videos. Like with COVID, let's have them, help with that. Or currently, because of COVID, we haven't kicked off our kids lead this year, but Erin's still pulling kids all the time. Hey, can you do this object lesson? Can you do, would you like to lead worship today or lead this prayer time? And so that's ingrained in our culture. And then they get pulled into those programs where we get to invest even more deeply. But that's just something that we're looking to do all the time with every student that comes into our ministries.
That's very cool. So I want to go back to something we started to talk about just a minute ago. What are some of the concepts? Maybe Angie and Fletcher, you guys could talk to this. What are concepts, principles, maybe Bible stories that you guys would love for your students to have had as they enter into the youth ministry? And then Erin, maybe you can speak into how have you guys worked backwards to implement those things within the children's ministry to equip them as they transition into youth?
Are you going to take that one?
I can go. That's actually one of the ones, and I actually think this is probably an important thing for anyone that's watching this to hear and understand too. That's actually one of the things that we're working on. We are still learning how to do this and to do it well. We've learned that we're further along than a lot of others, I think, as we've kind of been navigating through this, but we know some of the things that we'd like to have happen. But primarily, as we were just discussing this in preparation for this one of the big things so what does it look like to get these kids through, as they're going through this whole funnel system, to have full ownership? As a church, our church's atmosphere here, its DNA is making disciples, to be disciples who make disciples. So for us, it's been more of what does that look like from a youth ministry, children's ministry perspective. And we've still kind of been in the process of figuring out in terms of the details what that looks like. What is our plan on paper? Truth be told, in that part, we don't necessarily have a plan on paper. We learn as we're going through this, we need a plan on paper for something like that.
Yeah.
So that would be the best advice that I can give right now. Get a plan on paper.
No, but just always be learning and growing as a team.
Yes.
So this was such a fruitful conversation for us as we prepared for this, because we do meet regularly and talk about some of this stuff. But to be able to look at that question and go, I guess we haven't really sat down and had this conversation. What would it look like for us to sit down and put a strategic plan on paper? What would it look like to record what we're doing now and get that, and then see if we need to make some edits? I think that's a growth area for us. And so I would love to just encourage anybody watching that you're going to have those growth areas too, and that's good. God uses them. So don't be discouraged if you're listening to this and you're like, oh, wow, they sound like they have it all together. We don't. But God's doing some really good things through us and in our church and in the students that we have the privilege of serving and the families that we have the privilege of serving.
Yeah.
That's one of the things that Fletcher and Angie, I love about both of you, because you're so stinking humble. And I'm like, take some credit. There are things that you could say. I know. I'll speak to them. I know what they are. You know that the students that are coming out of the children's ministry, they know the books of the Bible. They know the stories of Scripture. They know who Jesus is. They understand the context of discipleship. They understand leadership, which honestly, some of those are impressive for students entering middle school to understand and to know. They know spiritual disciplines. They know the power of prayer and Bible reading. And so the children's ministry, children and youth ministries have been amazing at Grace there. And so don't sell yourself short.
intentionality, I think what we're talking about is the intentionality of having it down. And that is something we discussed this week, going, man, wouldn't it be cool to have like this growth path? But we also don't want it to be this checklist either. We do have those things. Those are obvious fruit we do see coming out of children's ministry. But it's because we're meeting kids where they're at, and we're teaching the word each week and those things, but taking it from a checklist to a heart growth plan. One of the things we did talk about yesterday was the fact that that whole idea of head, heart, and hands, and that in our children's ministry, we have a lot of head going on. We're doing a lot of teaching, a lot of repeating verses and attributes of God, and the stories of the Bible, the books of the Bible. What is a Bible? Why do we read the Bible? Where are things in the Bible? And repetitive over and over, getting some of that head knowledge down with bits and pieces of heart transformation and hands. How do we put this into practice? Especially as we get older, our kids are growing, and being able to put that into practice and understand how those things are affecting in their heart. But I would say a lot more is pointed toward head, some more head knowledge, and getting those basics, the basic foundation laid. And then we talked, Angie, you can pick up in middle school.
So then in middle school, we really shift to a more heart-based focus, primarily because they're starting to be able to think abstractly. They're starting to be able to wrestle with some harder concepts, and they're looking at the world around them and trying to figure out, like, okay, but where does my faith fit in this? And maybe they're wrestling with some hard questions for the first time. And so we go there. We go deep into on a heart level, are they connecting with Christ? And how are they connecting with Christ? And are they taking hold of their faith for real for themselves? Not just because their parents have taken them there. Like, are they taking the truth that they've learned and processing it on a deep heart level? And then we start really working on, okay, well, if you're feeling that conviction, if you're, at that place and God's working on you there, then how do you live that out? And then in high school, I'll let Fletcher speak to what happens next. It's really exciting.
And then high school, it is like Erin said, this head, heart, and hands kind of model that we do with how we ask our questions. Each of a small group is where those terms come from. But for high school, it really does become a hands thing in terms of, okay, now what are you doing to actually live this out? If you say this is what you believe, if you say this is what you are about, how are you living it? How are you acting on that? And then also, how are you helping someone else figure out what you figured out now as well too? So it kind of wraps all back together, going back to that head of how are you now pouring into the word and growing in your own knowledge of their word? How are you asking the right questions to let it convict you rather than someone asking those questions for you? And then what are you doing to show others how to do that as well?
And preparing for them to go and do it on their own, so that by the time they're seniors, they're fully confident and secure in their faith and ready to go wherever God leads them and walk it out and continue on that path.
Yeah, that's really cool. I love the vision of that. I love I know you guys have success stories and victories and wins that you could share. And I really would love to hear that, but just for sake of time, I want to transition to one other question that I think maybe if our viewers are listening, they might be thinking, Eric asked this question, but what would you say has been the hardest thing to overcome in developing and implementing this strategy of connecting your children's ministry to your youth ministry?
Time.
Yeah, I was going to say the exact same thing. Time. I want to do all the things and be in all the places and time.
Go a little deeper, Ann. What do you mean by that?
I think going back to what I said at the beginning of just running in a survivor mode, just having the time to strategically plan, taking the time to pray and lay that foundation. I think in talking over the last several months, even our heart's desire too is to really equip the family and to, we as children's and youth directors are trying to meet three different needs, three different people group needs. We're meeting the students in our ministry, our volunteers we're trying to train, but we are also meeting where our parents are at. And so having to look at all three areas and do that effectively is difficult. It's good, it's challenging, but it's hard. And we know that our parents have way more time with their kids than we do. And so learning how to effectively equip our families who have children and teens, in all of our ministries, that's something that, I wish I had more time to plan and prepare and meet with these guys as far as strategizing.
So I love that, because in essence, what you're saying is it's worth it to take the time to press pause on your day-to-day, week-to-week things that you just can fall into, the routine, the ruts, if you will, and to brainstorm, to strategize, to pray and dream big and figure out a plan to move forward. Fletcher, you said it, put it on paper, right? Hold yourself accountable, begin to implement those things. So as we kind of look to wrap up, what advice, maybe encouragement would you give to the churches, the leaders who are watching this and they're thinking, I want to embark on this process, but maybe I don't know where to begin, or I'm not really sure. What advice, encouragement would you give to them?
Two things for me. I'll go ahead and go since they're staring at me, I think. I don't know. I can't tell where you're all staring. I think you're staring at me. Two things. One, take advantage of the opportunities. We talked a lot about our ministries pre-COVID, because we talk about COVID as being like the mulligan, right? Like, this isn't how it looks like. But the truth is, COVID is what in some ways gave us the time for us to start talking more intentionally with each other. And it freed up some opportunities in the beginning there in some ways. I actually, believe it or not, in some ways love this COVID season because it required us all to be very collaborative. And I'm a very collaborative individual. I like working with a team on this kind of stuff. So it was actually kind of fun for me. Mm-hmm. But the other thing, and I'm actually going to lean in for this one to show how serious I am on this. If you don't listen to anything else that I said, listen to this. Be a champion for the other ministries. The easiest way not to be a church of siloed ministries is to champion for your teammates' ministries. I love these ladies largely because I know that they are some of my biggest supporters in what's going on in high school ministry. And I try very hard to do the same for them as well. That's why I think if you came here and realize we don't try and in a lot of play churches, they're competing for volunteers. We don't compete for volunteers. Sometimes we will tell someone, hey, you need to go to this other person because they need volunteers right now and you'd be really good for that. We really do what we can to be supporters, cheerleaders, have each other's back, and really just go all in for each other, not just for what's going on in our own ministry.
So even good. To the extent of serving in each other's ministries,
yes.
In little ways. We obviously can't do that all the time because we're working really hard in our own ministries. But during summer VBS, Fletcher and I are always eager to get a chance to serve alongside some of our students too. And Erin stepping up in middle school and high school ministry in little ways for events, different things that she can. I try to do a study with the preteens before they come into middle school. So just that's another way you can champion your coworkers or your other volunteers. If you have a volunteer team, their ministries as well, is do ministry with them, be a part of these other ministries.
I would add on to that, and it's something we discussed before, is just knowing the strengths and weaknesses on your team too, and really, pulling towards those. And I meet with Angie and ask her, hey, what do you think about this? Because I know she's strong in a certain area, and Fletcher as well has wisdom, and, knowing that we have each other's backs and that we can collaborate, even though we are leading maybe in separate areas, definitely feel that camaraderie, that cohesion as a team.
I brag about, Erin. I brag about what's going on in their ministries just as much as what's going on in the high school ministry. And I would not have that any other way.
Yeah. And we celebrate together, you know, in the office, if we have a kid that made a big step in their faith, like we're celebrating together. We're like, guess what? You know, and or we have a good event, we're coming in energized the next day and sharing that celebration together. Not in like, we're not throwing a party, but we're just really, we all celebrate the wins in children's middle school, high school, and beyond.
Very cool. Awesome. Well, thank you guys. One other question, we'll end on this one, is just kind of this idea for maybe our churches who don't have a paid or full-time volunteer or staff member that's over each of those ministries. I know many churches don't have a middle school, director, somebody that oversees that. They have, a youth pastor that oversees both, or maybe they have volunteers that run some scope of this ministry. Are there ways that you guys see that they could still implement this model in connecting and handing off students into those ministries? And maybe even what things would you say to them that they could consider implementing or doing for churches who don't have that full-time or a paid staff member? Thoughts on that?
I know we didn't mention this one as much. We talked about this one a little bit, Liz, but I will say first off, even though it's the no-brainer one, pray. And the reason why I say that is Eric could tell a whole long story, but when he was the youth pastor here, he told me a story of how he had been praying very fervently that there would be a time where there could be a middle school person and a high school person. And that was a passionate prayer that you had for a long time there, Eric. And that did eventually happen. God did provide that way. But even along with that, no matter what looks like, whether you're a volunteer, whether you're working with volunteers, don't think you can just do this all on your own. You really need to do this with other people. There's no getting around that.
Yeah, build a team, find a community. There are online networks. CE National is a great resource, or a local network. All three of us are involved in different groups outside of our own church, that we connect with regularly to bounce ideas off each other, to pray with each other, to process and troubleshoot. So that's a great opportunity. I would also encourage you to celebrate small victories, to focus on where God has you, not where you're not. Don't look at, like, oh, we don't have this, or we're not, we can't do that. Focus on what you can do and do that really well. And then celebrate what God is doing there. God knows where your church is at. God knows where you're at. He has you there. And so embrace that and see where the Spirit leads you. And look at, maybe there was something small that we shared, or something that we shared that you're like, man, I feel like this is what we need. Or even, I can't remember who said it, but somebody said that we saw leadership. Erin, you said we saw leadership in the children's ministry, in the kids in the ministry, and that's why we started this Kid Lead program. Same with the middle school ministry. I'm like, when I came on board, I was looking at the high school leadership team, and I'm looking at my middle schoolers, and I'm like, they can do this. There are leaders here. And so that's how that was birthed. So look at the kids in your ministry and what God's doing there and how they're wired and what their gifts are. Lean into that, and then take small steps towards whatever vision God places on your heart.
I would piggyback on what Angie just said, and Fletcher, I guess. Don't do it by yourself, and look for the people you can invest in. I think as leaders, sometimes it's easier for us to do it ourselves because we know what we're doing and we just keep control and we just do it all. But if we don't delegate and we don't give opportunities to our kids to lead, and the adults in your ministry, if they're volunteers, look for the people with the gifts of what you need on your team and let them do it. Let them mess up. Be there, help them to learn, but allow them to own the ministry and to come alongside of you and build that team. The second thing I would just suggest is, remember, comparison is the thief of joy. So while you connect with other networks and ministry leaders, while you watch this, we do not have it all together. We have a lot to work on. There are a lot of areas that we need to let the Lord lead and change. But don't think we have it all together or anybody else does. You, like Angie said, God is calling you. He has equipped you. You do what he asked you to do for today, and let him be your joy, not the success of your ministry.
Wow. You guys, this has been wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing. Thank you for sharing your hearts, your experiences, the things that God's used, those hardships, Erin, as you were just saying, that all of that he uses to build your faith, to build his church, and ultimately to see God get the glory. And so it's not about us. It's all about him. So thank you guys for being faithful in that process and cultivating a church environment. And I know God's going to continue to do great things in and through the ministry there in Frederick, and through your church, for those of you who are watching this video, as you begin to prayerfully consider how to implement some of these things and connect your children and your youth ministry. So on behalf of Erin and Angie and Fletcher and Grace Community Church and CE National, thank you so much for watching this Digital Lab. Erin, why don't you just close us out in a word of prayer and pray for our viewers as they wrestle with this process.
Father God, you are so good to us. You know just what we need. And I will say, I did not want to do this, and yet you used it to just remind me of how faithful you are, Lord, and what you're doing to connect our ministries and how we can serve the full body of Christ all across our Charis Fellowship and beyond. Lord, I just thank you for this opportunity. I thank you for the people watching, Lord. And I just pray that our eyes are turned to you. God, you are beckoning us to rise up, to lead, to build teams and build up the body of Christ. And so we just ask, Lord, that you give us the strength to do that, the energy to do that, and keep our eyes focused on you, focused on your word. I pray, Lord, that you would just continue to encourage each one of us, Lord, in the work that you have called us to do. We honor you and we praise you this day. In Jesus' name, amen.